Hi there, just one day after another. Again, a video. I think that, yeah, I have. This day have been quite good so far, except for until 1 hour ago or something like that. I get sort of. I don't know. I was quite motivated yesterday about learn academic models and other stuff. And I just notice something that might be helpful for other people, and it's something that I've been suspecting is that when I eat a lot of calories, then I mean, I think it's mainly carbohydrates, but I'm not entirely positive, but I think that's the. And then as I did for lunch, then I tend to be quite anxious afterwards, and that's an idea my friend first rate for me, and I sort of track that's quite true. And yeah, so probably won't do that again. But so I did really what I wanted to do. I got further into some topics that I thought was interesting, and yeah, some people's thoughts, and played some guitar, sing a bit, and then I felt guilty for not doing these academic models that I talked about. I think I talked about it, but anyway, I got to the conclusion that that's the right thing to do, especially in the morning. I got to that in conclusion, but then I had other routine thing I had to do, and then so I haven't really done it except for just recently. Last 20 minutes, I sort of went back to these economic principles, or whatever name, principles of economics, I think it's name. And the first thing that they address in that book is sort of 10 ground rules for whole economics, the 10 principles, and then everything follows on that. And I've already done that, but I sort of rehearsed it and built sort of a picture memorization for it. And it's just 10 simple but powerful principles. And after that I thought, well, or I wanted to, as I formulated in a document, and maybe I mentioned it, I don't remember that, but that in doing academic principles or academic models, I mean, then I shouldn't really have to spend that much time on everyone. Like summarizing the most essential points in every academic models can make you go on to the next one quite quickly. And so I thought, yeah. But then when I thought about doing it, opened that book again, I just got demotivated and thought, and this is something that's come up to my mind again, and I think it's important to raise, because if it's true, which I suspect, it's true to some degree, but it's hard to boil down how common it is or how prevalent it is in anyone's life or in my life, and that is that when I thought about it as something struggling, I sort of justified not doing it by not being sure it's the right thing to do. And I thought about that. Am I really? What's going on here? Am I seriously doubting it, or am I just demotivated? And so there are different ways to think about this. Should I have forced myself to do it, or was it the state that I was in that was the reason I didn't do it? And yeah. And it might seem obvious, but yeah, you should have just done it. But now when I'm thinking about it, I tend to well, was I sure that was the right thing? No, I can't be 100% sure. So that's referring back to what I talked about earlier. But the hesitation came from not really being motivated to do it. So the question is, you could ask, in a situation without motivation, what's the best principle? Is it go straight for the challenging thing, or is it to get motivation? But at the same time, that's not really the issue, because in some way the answer is obvious, or you just do it. I mean, but yeah, kind of. But it's still the question that I'm sort of contemplating: was the right thing to actually do it? Was it? I want to be honest with myself. With myself, should I have done it? And I don't know the answer, to be honest. Am I tricking myself? Is it just a way for me to feel better about myself, to say that I should have done it? I'm seriously troubled by that question. Seriously. Like, should I have pushed further and doing the academic models? It's so damn hard to... But like, in a perfect world, if you can stay... Like, in a sense, if you're about to do it, if I am doing it and I feel extremely motivated while I am doing it, this is quite interesting to think about, right? If I would have done it because I was extremely motivated to do it, it would probably have... I wouldn't find a way to justify why it would be the right thing to do. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is the lack of motivation an indication for there's something wrong in doing it, or is it just laziness and not? I guess that maybe I'm making things, yeah, I said that before, but maybe I'm making things too complicated here, but I get somewhat just depressed of thinking about it. So I try to be more jolly as yesterday. But, okay, so the issue is, what should I think about in this circumstance about the doing academic models? What is the right thing to do? That's the question. Learn academic models. I said to myself, yeah, that's a good thing to do. Is any approach to learning that good? No, of course not. But just reading a book and memorizing ideas is probably a good way to do it, but at the same time it's boring, and it's maybe that's just the thing. But because one thought that comes up when I start doing it and thinking about doing it is, I'm not that... on some level, I am skeptical in how useful it is. I do generally think that empirical sort of models are useful, and I, like, for example, I have said it's an approximation to the reality, and the best thing we have, like Newton's laws of physics and genetics and how that relates to human beings. It's usually really good stuff. But economics, I do appreciate some of models that I've learned that when I studied, like, for example, marginal utility and opportunity cost is very useful concepts. And I thought that And so anyway, even if you don't agree, it's good to know about academic models, knowing how much you can apply them, in what their truth, even though it might not be the pinnacle or the most, like the best thing, it's still like good. And so the question is, yeah. Okay, so the question is not, so what once we're stating it is, yes, it's something you should know. The utility of these type of principles, or the principles are good, I like them, but on all the knowledge is also good. So I should do it. I should learn it and have it in my mind. So that's not okay. I'm get past that. So the question is, should I have done it right now? That's more the accurate question, because it is something I should do. Even economics. I mean, I tend to get demotivated about it sometimes, because it's, even though the concept I do know is very useful, like opportunity cost and marginal utility, and just reasoning about specialization and the limits of it and all that, and Adam Smith's ideas in general, and his concern about the consequences of a commercial society that are not, and I always positive, but on the whole, we're better off, as he and David Hume agreed upon. But so it is good to learn, and it's good to learn what's now, what's sort of accepted, and like, yeah. So going down that road, what I was about to do is the right thing to do, but the question is, was that time the right thing to do it? So it's back to the motivation thing, which I realize I've actually changed my mind on this, because earlier I said the interesting thing is if it's the right thing to do. It's not really about if I should address our motivation. It's more like, is it actually the right thing to do? But now I'm about to change my mind. It was the right thing to do, but it is about the motivation instead. Should I have addressed motivation rather than just doing it? Which is sort of the same thing. And you could say, if you really know that it's rational, the best good thing to do, I just came to a profound insight that I have to write down. Maybe even during this video, but I will start just formulating so I don't forget it. And maybe lack of rational action, and even moral action, because I think I reasoned about this yesterday. At least I did it when I was out and running and exercising today. That a moral action is really just courage to do what is right, even though you might be perceived as immoral. If it's right, the most admirable thing with courage you can do is to behave morally when you're perceived as being immoral, because you have a moral responsibility to be rational, because you have a rational to consider things that other people don't understand, so that you actually behave morally when you're not perceived as. That's quite much courage. But anyway, and so, but yeah, yes. So the connection to what I'm talking about right now was that maybe, because it's really about being honest to yourself, and you have so strong incentives that this is probably the issue. This is the issue, because if you have biases that are working against you, and you're not rational, consider the situation rational enough. If it's not rational obvious to you, if you have not ingrained the rationality deep enough, even though you might on some rational subconscious level or some vague rational level know what's right. Like, for example, I knew it was right, but I was not sure. It's quite of the equivalence when Charlotte Munger talks about the bias of excessive self-regard. Like, he said, like, in demanding places, people will discard you if you're not behaving, like, if you're not, because of excessive self-regard, you won't be able to take criticism, so you won't upgrade yourself because you're not able to see that you're all out of actual fault, or you're not good enough. So you won't take criticism, and eventually people will discard you. And he said, well, if it's your own kid, maybe you could be somewhat more allowing. But one way to learn your kid a good thing is that he took an example of a friend the friend as a kid learned a lesson from his father that was one that he really didn't remember, and that's really exemplifies this, because the kid had taken candy from a sort of bottle or something, and when the dad noticed him doing that, which he knew I think it was in a shop, or could also have been at home. The kid and the dad noticed him, and he probably didn't know that he was doing something wrong. The kid said, well, I will put it back later, or I will put it back, and like as if that was his intention from the beginning. I will put it back. And the father said that, kid, it's probably better for you to be honest and actually take the candy than lying about you would put it in back. And that's sort of the honesty of being honest that you did something wrong, rather than sort of diluting reality so that your act seems moral, because no one can. That's when I think about it, it's actually such a profound thing, because you think like anyone who's doing things, I don't think no one, or very few people, let's say, except if you're a sociopath or psychopath. Otherwise, I think like enormous amount of politicians or political people do think that they are morally right, that they're doing something good for society. But it's not that they believe, that they believes, they're so heavy biases that pushes them to make that conclusion rather than actual rational thought. And one of them is that if you're not right, you won't behave morally. And that's the key right there. That if you would have been more rational, you would have spotted your immoral behavior. But you won't do it because you have an incentive to feel yourself moral. I don't know how evolution made that happen, but maybe it's the in-group sort of thing that you want to be perceived as moral, or and you sort of associate that with. But in my circumstance, in this case, it was probably just like the first bias Charlotte Munger talks about, and it's actually the third principle in economics. People respond to incentives, and so incentives. And Charlotte Munger said, or wrote in his first bias is simple. No, it's named reward and punishment bias, kind of, incentives, like you drawn to reward and away from punishment. But he's mostly emphasized on reward. So it's basically carrot and the sticks. But here it was probably the case that I felt so much pain associated with doing the almanac thing but I had sense and reasonable enough to refer it to reason rather than anything else. So I accurately raised the question, well, is this rational? And it took a while for me to determine, yes, it was the rational thing. But, and here's the connection to the other thing, that if you don't have it perfectly clear for you that it is the rational, in other cases, moral thing to do, which you could associate this to be actually, it is the moral key because you have a moral thing to do, because you have a, like for example, what I want to do with my life is sort of centered on my purpose, and my purpose is sort of a, you could say, an altruistic, or at least elements of moral in it that are quite large. Not saying that it's, of course, that it's selfish connected to that, but it could be serving both things simultaneously. I think that's, yeah, true for everyone, even though they won't admit it. But anyway, if I, so one could say that I am immoral not to pursue that. But I was rational enough. But since I was referring to rationality, I eventually now understood that that was the rational thing to do, and my rational brain could override the bias that was focused on the pain. And the rationality gave me an incentive, an opposite sort of incentive, to go towards actually doing it. And so, but now I'm in a different situation, because now I consider that, but since it was not clear to me, I had to remind myself what is the rational thing to do here. Because the thoughts that went through my mind in that situation was, well, this sort of what's it called? This I lost my train of thought, but I was so okay. I got stuck on different thoughts here, but just recapitulating. What the fuck? So I was in that situation. Yeah, I did think about sort of science as an approximation to as I mentioned here, and therefore academic models is the right thing to do. But then the thoughts about, as I aired here, that well, if it's so boring, should I be focused on motivation or what makes me unhappy, or should I be focused on is it really good to learn? I mean, it's sort of boring. Isn't the boring signaling to me that it's not actually something to pursue, because sometimes it's actually the case that you can spot with pure boredom if you're insightful enough. What's boring or not interesting is sort of an indication that it's not stimulating intellectually enough, but I don't think this was the case here. Some things are boring, but that wasn't obvious to me right then. I do think that's the case. And so the question is here, if I'm, just to push myself a little, if I again associate it as a moral act to actually have done it. So the implication of that is really that it was immoral not to doing it. So that's and that's why I say sort of this demanding principle that that you have a moral responsibility to be rational. That's the key, because I've said here in these videos and otherwise, like for example, if someone want to have an influence on society in some way and they are wrong, about the consequences of that influence. And they have a moral sort of guiding light in that, and they cause harm. Are they moral or immoral? Well, it is true that the intention of what's moral is what you, well, it's true to say, I will not say it is moral, but it was a good intention. But good intentions, it's difficult to say because there are different ways. This is the right way to think about it. There are different morals, maybe. And one is rationality, probably, and another one is good intention. Do you want good for other people? And if you have the second part, that you want good for, that's usually what people figure out. Most people have some sort of conscience. And yeah, so I think most people think of themselves as moral. But as I said, if you could be totally rational evaluating most people, you would find they're not moral. Maybe partly because they have incentives in their own, like they sort of distort things, but also because the conclusion that they think or have biases that push them to think is moral, or actually the reason that they think it is moral is due to the biases rather than rational thinking. If they had been rational, they would have come to another conclusion. So it is true to say that most people who try to behave morally, that have a good intention, like an obvious, let's suppose that I don't know how true this is, or to how high degree this is true, but an overprotecting mother might cause harm on the child. That's quite, I think it's fair to say that could happen. And she has a good intention in her protection. She wants the good for the child. Then she has, in order to override that, so you could say, it's not really fair to say that she's immoral in that. But I don't want to say that as a defense of that just because what I did, it doesn't become moral. But just a woman caring for a child, I don't think it's, of course it's selfish actually on the gene level, but anyway, but anyway, but I've actually thought about this myself, because I think behaviors in my mother, not necessarily overprotective, well, maybe, yeah, but other behaviors, that just because she thinks she's moral, or at least just because she has good intention, doesn't mean she has good outcome on me or anyone else. And it's true for so many things. It's true for all mothers or all fathers, or like in any circumstance. It's like thinking you're behaving good or moral is not the same as actually having a positive influence. And so it's hard to know if it's moral or not, but in the circumstance that you would have known what was rational, then it would be immoral to do the thing that you perceive it as being moral right now. And so that's why, and that have the ugly consequence I realize now, that I talked about courage earlier. I said that courage is basically to behave morally when you be perceived as immoral, and further understanding and rationality will put you in a situation where you perceive what is rational considered moral when others don't. And that means that your acts will not necessarily be perceived as immoral, but people won't understand when they are moral, what you're doing. And that's, a bitter truth, I guess. But now in this circumstance, when I know that I should, next time I'm in a similar situation, and I can remember what I have just said in this situation here, I will pursue studying the academic models, or although yeah, maybe I missed a part of the truth, because one part of it is also, like, if you think, let's suppose that you think something is extremely boring. I know I might trick myself here, but I'm just trying to think things through rationally here. If you think that something is extremely boring, like some people say that you should just pursue your interest, and that will have overriding sort of ripple effects on other subjects, and you will, yeah, so on and so forth. But like, for example, when because to be honest, that was what's happened now. I thought that I do have a justification, by the way, that comes through around my mind here, to continue this video, rather than, because I think this is extremely useful for me. So that's why I justify doing this rather than. But I do come up with the thought that when I quit this video and doing this very useful thing, then I won't have an opportunity cost anymore. That is sort of, this is the best thing I can do doing this video, but after that's the second best thing to do, or when I finish, the best thing to do is maybe actually to do academic models. And what I realized was that a quite heavy wave of boredom came to me, and I thought, oh, fuck no, not that. That's so and so I want to address that again, like rational, to ingrain that if it's the rational thing, I actually want to have it on top of my mind again, even more clear that it is the rational thing to do. So it's still true that it is true that approximations of reality is scientific models. That's why I have to learn them. But if in a case when you're severely demotivated, should you always pursue learning academic models? I mean, for me, who have intellectual interest, yes, I should do it now and then. Should I do it all the time? Should I schedule it so that it's not like unclear when I should do it? That's a method that people like and do oftentimes. Should try to make it a habit. Or instead, instead of thinking how should I deal with my psychological so it's easier, it's better to consider, I think at least, like boil down, what should I do? Doesn't matter what makes it easier. Although motivation is good to well, motivation is good to think about. Like, if you can do something that makes you extremely motivated and you will just do everything that's challenging, yeah, but what I'm saying here is really that the challenging thing, learn academic models, Alexander Munger in this book, I'm actually saying that is the right thing to do. And so the thought experiment I want to do here is that, should I, for the rest of this day, like, I'll be awake for maybe 6 hours more, should I do 6 hours academic models, learn a la Charles Munger these from this book from Man Cave. Should I do that in 6 hours? Just plowing through, learning as much as I can. And for now, my intuition is yes, but I don't have a rational answer for it. I just feel like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's the thing I should do. So now my motivation is getting up again. Okay, so next time I feel demotivated, do not want to do it, what will I think then? What is the rational thing? Why, or why is it? Because this might seem as harping this, but I just want to have something to hold on to know why it's the rational thing. Because motivation is not everything. Now I'm relying on motivation because it feels like doing the right thing. But it's not really a rational thought, to be honest. It's just I feel like, yeah, fuck yeah, it's the right thing. Okay, I have to go deeper into this. If that's the right thing to do, how should I handle demotivation the next time it appears? Or rather, how can I be sure that it is the right thing to do when I am demotivated? Because it is quite obvious that it's the good thing to do when I am motivated. Because then you should just follow the flow because you're doing something useful. But should you override demotivation by just doing it? Or should you focus on why you're not motivated? Like, for example, right now, I think I'm motivated because I've been doing this video. Because I often feel motivated after talking about things and reasoning about things and getting to the bottom of things. And so you could say that from the situation I was when I was demotivated earlier, I started to contemplate, was this the rational thing to do? Which was the right question that would have ended up, or did when I did this, would have ended up, yes, it was the right decision. But in the face of boredom, like often we're faced with a situation where we don't know what's right to do. That's quite common. And then just pushing through and doing something, like this thing is, should I have done it without having a rational explanation to doing it? And in some sense I want to say no, I shouldn't. I actually shouldn't. I did the right thing. I refer to rationality rather than to impulse. One impulse saying, no, it's boring, don't do it. Or saying, you should doing, it's your duty, even though it's boring. And I referred to sort of the middle of that, which was the rational thing to do. And to be honest, I picked up and did this video instead. Okay, so I actually don't remember what happened between that. I just know that I thought that this will give me motivation and clarity, maybe in this question and other questions. So, yeah. And it's interesting to think about, was it really, well, there are really 3 modes, or maybe 4 modes. One mode is thinking, purely thinking. Another mode is writing, which is, more communication-like. The third thing is speaking for yourself without anybody. And the fourth is communicating with someone else, or that at least as what you are doing. You could, another way could be you're on lecture and listen on someone else, then you're also thinking and you're listening. But yeah, this is what I thought about right now. And it's so, is it the reasoning itself that provides the motivation, which I do find it sometimes when I'm writing about stuff. I do find inspiration and so on and so forth. But I'm also but I think there's another component in talking about stuff. Disadvantage is that you can't go back to it as easily, and that's a powerful thing with writing, that is easier to go back to, and you can choose the speed also, how you rehearse, how fast you are reading, and you can use your visual feed, which is much more sort of broad than your hearing, and yeah, you can just scan things. So it's, but in providing motivation, maybe this is even better, because you are it's more human to reason with speech. Of course, thinking is also, but anyway, so again, the question, what should I do when I'm terribly demotivated at the next time and don't want to do it? I think now the boredom comes again. And I'm thinking, like, should I do it after this video for 6 hours, like pushing through? And for me, the answer seems to be yes still. But the boredom kicks in. So then I want to refer to reason. And my reason says academic model should be learned. And academic models, a big chunk of your day should be devoted to learning academic models. And when you're not, you should do other useful things. But if you're not reasoning irrationally, I think I said this last time, in a significant amount of your day, you're missing out on something really important, and that is the justification for what your action is. Like, you get a better justification for your action during the day. And if you don't have that grounding, you won't be able to distinguish good and bad deeds. So this sort of guilt that you might feel of not doing the right thing is because you have one bias pushing towards what feels good, or other biases that just kicks in, and you have not enough bias that pushes towards, or not enough reason that can incentivize, because I still think there's probably sort of a connection to, it's really about getting sure this is the right thing. And either it's the emotions that signaling what's the right thing to do, or it is reason that signaling what's the right thing to do. And reason only works when the reason can refer to what you think is morally or emotionally right. Because if you know, the justification in itself is an emotion, right? The justification in itself, well it's grounded, like if this is emotion, and this is emotion to the response to action, so this is emotion part in your brain, and this is the action part, and you just go like this. And the reasoning is, if this connection is wrong, which is like, that's why we human beings, we're able to go around it in rational thought and go back. And this connection to the right emotional sort of response, because I would argue that my sort of purpose and what my intention and why I'm doing stuff is on some level based on some moral, or some, like, what should I do with my life, what's inspiring. So this is really the motivation to do what is hard, and the motivation goes via the rational part, if you're rational. Otherwise, you will just be stuck in this, and you won't really execute things in a rational way. You won't get used of the cultural knowledge, like for example the scientific models that I talk about that's up here. You won't get used of it. You can't use it. You can't make this connection hard enough, and so you will. Yeah, I think that's an incredible useful way to think about it. So when I'm in doubt next time, if I feel tired or in doubt, because this is the difficult part, because your brain gets tired of being rational also. That's probably true to say. And should you be rational 100% of your day? I don't know. Like, the issue is, like, should I be doing this, like, 10 to 12 hours every day? And this, I mean, like, academics will learn, like, principles of economics. And I'm thinking, maybe. That would mean I would, and it's, to be honest, quite motivating to think about it. Like, for example, what would I exclude? And this is really scientific thinkers to think about. I'm actually using some of the principles that I learned. That's a good thing, even though, well, this is principles I've been using for a long time. I really like, by the way, the principles, because two of them are two principles from economics that I myself picked up, even though it wasn't presented as principles or as fundamental as this book does. But when I read economics, I picked up two things very. The most important thing was opportunity cost. The other one was marginal utility. And that's two of the principles, actually. 2 of 10, so it's like 20% of the whole fundamental foundation for economics. And I actually happened to just pick out those two as the most useful thing to apply in life, and I'm quite stunned by that. I actually did that and not picked up anything else, because it's definitely not obvious that is at the foundation of economics, even though this book can make it obvious. But yeah, so opportunity cost, where were I? If I'm thinking about, this was a thing, what's the opportunity cost and marginal utility of doing activities during a day? Like, for example, should I exclude eating? No, I probably shouldn't, but, well, that could be a consideration, doing it. Like, for example, if you I never thought about it. It's maybe not the most important thing to think about, but consider something like fasting is something quite good. I happen to feel good when I do it, or at least after I've been doing it. And I feel like in the long term it's a good thing to do. Like, now and then, now I try to 1 time a week fast 24 hours. It's not a big deal. I did sort of 18-hour fast every day for months. So having just a 6, even I actually did sort of 22-hour fast for a while. I just had one meal, like sort of the Spartan thing. I didn't know it was it, but, and so, yeah, anyway, so and then, yes, the thought I could be eating every other day to optimize so that I get more time, because that one thing I realized when I fasted for sort of, as long as I did this for, I think it was 4 or close to 4 days, like 24 hours times 4, and I realized there's so much time wasted on eating. You get so much time, it's incredible. And on top of that, you sleep less, so you get lots of time. But anyway, that's not, I don't have to think about that. It's not rational to consider that even more for now. So I just think that that's as an example of something that have marginal utility. You should eat, but you shouldn't eat all the day. So you have to sacrifice some time, and you should sacrifice sleep. But instead of that, that's sort of what you can sacrifice. And then what the rest of the time? Well, exercise. Yes, I have to make in that. So, and probably these type of videos maybe is a good thing. So let's say then I have 11 hours left or so. How much should I do leisure, like free time and so on? I'm not at my work for now, or well, I don't have work. I am a student, but it's a holiday now, so I get time. I don't have some responsibilities and so forth, but it's Christmas now, so it'll be with time with family and so forth. And I have some issue that I have to look into what's the next course I should choose, and should I consider getting a job during the summer or so. There's something I have to consider already, but so that might take approximately 2 hours every other day or so, and so I left with 9 to 11 hours. But spare time, that's the issue here, and parents and so forth. And the issue here is the spare time thing, because how much should you devote to doing things that's leisure, sort of? How much is leisure time and how much should you do of it? Like, I've been very, what's the word, not liberal, sort of unrestricted on my day. I basically, the last two weeks I've been really do whatever you want, really, and it's been feeling quite good to do that. And I have earlier a similar approach that I woke up at 7 in the morning, and I did sort of important things, like said, executing on my activities that I was sort of learning and so forth, until lunch around 12 to 1, and after that I was free, and I had this sort of carrot, like how you prefer the day. And so what I'm thinking about now is that should I have something like that? Should I, because I abandoned that to some degree, and especially to last week I've been like woken up like between 8 to even 11 at times, and I still have some of the sort of the responsibilities left, like for example repeating knowledge that I've learned and so forth, and that's the only thing I have now. But otherwise, when I was still studying for half a week ago, I was still needed to study 1 hour a day, including repetition then also, and but now and it's also true that the marginal utility, or put it this way, the longer time I spend on making the decision, the more time I'm sacrificing for learning. That's also an important thing. But making the decisions in this time, at this circumstance, includes talking. And I think this is a good exercise, actually. So I could justify prolonging the rationality of the decision just by continuing talking about it. But I don't think that's obviously not the rational thing to do, because being honest about it is better too. And then it could still be that talking about things is the rational thing to do, and as long as I'm doing this video. But I don't think that I should use that as an argument for. I could use it as an argument to get more sure about what's the rational thing to do. But if that's not the case, then I should decide how much more thing is rational, considered good to devote to this video, and then go on and actually do the academics sort of things. And one sort of meta zooming out here observation is that it's quite obvious that I have some difficulty in addressing this book with economic principles. It's something about it that I'm not that something that's like, no. And I think one reason for that is, again, is this something to pursue, that is important to pursue? And this is something that really often happens to me. Like evaluating if a train of thought is worth pursuing. Is that really worth the time thinking about, or should you just pursue it? Like what I'm thinking about here is it better to pursue the thought of I'm confused. I forgot it. I thought, is it rational to pursue the thought? Which thought? What I'm conflicting about? Either my brain is tired, I guess. But yeah, now I boiled down a quite good justification of doing it. The question is, how much should I do it? Should I establish a habit of doing it now and then, and should I get sort of demotivated because it's a long journey, this. And I think it's not, I don't think I should feel too guilty, because when I was in that situation, because what I want to address now is, I thought like just being stuck in a subject and forcing yourself to do it for a prolonged time sometimes make me demotivated, and I lost sort of track of thought. And then the rational thing is probably to contemplate that situation. Are you doing the right thing? And then I want to refer back, and I just want to remember that now, that part, that you should, that just pushing through too much could be not good sometimes. And I want to connect that to when I was in this situation and thinking, should I actually pursue it? And I got to the rational part of my brain instead of thinking of guilt that I should do it or I should not do it. So instead of using the bias, I refer to rationality to some extent, even though I'm not sure what happened between that and the video. But I did pick up the video and started to rationally consider it, and that was the right thing to do. So the rational consideration was still there. And so the question is, it is probably a good thing for me to think what I'm doing with my day and how much I'm devoting to. And I actually said that yesterday, that it is a really good thing to do, to rationally consider. But this is the big fucking but, but. But as a but. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Just my head just went blank. But yes, so what I was talking about was that what happened today was that I did the usual thing I do in the morning or before lunch. And after that, when I was thinking about sort of pursuing this, doing academic models, I'm not sure I thought about it really clear, but there came up activities and things. And for one thing, I ate so much calories, so I just justified not doing it because I felt so damn bad eating so much. And I've heard somewhere that brain work is not really that good to do exact. Well, okay. It was a notice of Charlotte Munger, a new video, so. But anyway, I will take it later. whoa, 1 hour. Where were I? Yes, what happened today was that I justified sort of not doing that by, I felt terribly bad. Okay, not that bad, but I felt like, ugh, I've been eating too much, and I just felt, as I usually do then, tired, which is what you usually do when you eat very much. And so I learned one lesson. I will probably not do that again, not that much. And so, but I do also know that many people like Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, and also sort of scientists, they take a nap and they take it after lunch. And Winston Churchill took a nap from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m., which is usually when people get tired. It's sort of in circadian rhythm, it's the time where your brain sort of are low in. But there's different, so it's a shift in the system it's a curve sort of that takes out the other or something like that, so that you feel tired at that time. So that's what he did. But yeah, just got reminded about it. But anyway, so when you're eating, I don't know what was right. So, but what's interesting after that, or during that, I started to listen to a video of Daniel Schmachtenberger. It's a funny name, and I justified it because I think it's intelligent in some ways, really intelligent. I mean, really, actually, in some aspects, really, it's not many people say that about, but on some topics he seemed to. I can't say for everything, but because I don't know. But on some of he's few people I admire in that sense. So I listened to that, and to be honest, I actually think that my behavior in this video is influenced about it, and actually my thinking in some levels. Yeah, definitely my thinking, not everything, but some things, and for good or bad. Not everything is but positive, but I think a huge amount of it is, like compared to other people, it's insane. So I listened to that, then I'm not sure I did that much else actually. It was quite long, 1.5 hours, but I probably watched like high speed, so, and with pauses, so like 1 hour or less, 1 hour probably. And so should I have not listened to it? What should I have done instead? Should I have done something else instead? Like, provided that I did not have a rational justification for actually pursuing academic models, no. But had I known what I know now, I should. I think. Or well, first thing, I shouldn't have eaten as much as I did. That's the first thing. I should not. That's something I want to be quite clear, because it's not healthy to eat that much, and I sort of justified it because it's, I fasted 24 hours, as I said yesterday, and I thought I would have to eat much more to get sort of filled up, but not that. But I could have eaten like at least 75% of that amount. At least. And so yeah, be more careful of eating too much, because you ruin your day really. I should be observant of that, because the worst thing can happen, you eat too little, and that's rarely happening when you eat so much as I did that back then. So yeah, don't eat. That's the first lesson. And if I had not eaten that much, I would have been more able to rationally consider. Although he is incredibly insightful, so it's a hard trade-off to know if I should listen to him or doing academic models. So yes, it's a hard trade-off. This is so damn hard. Because what I'm starting to think about now is it's also a hard trade-off, because I'm sort of thinking about, I listen to or I watch the movies, lots of movies. I read Lord of the Rings, and one part of me says that's a waste of time, I should have done academic models, and one other part of me says no, you shouldn't. And I think this is a hypothesis, and I want to pursue this rigorously. And I think, or the hypothesis is that I should have, for the last, say, last 18 months, not further back, because I didn't have the insight then, and I didn't have or if I was rationally, if I knew that it was the rational thing I should have, for the last 18 months, yeah, I did a terrible wrong thing, or it's an important thing to recognize that I should have done differently. And the thing I should have done differently is that I should have been more disciplined in pursuing academic models and learning them and ingraining them deeper in my mind. Although it's true that the more insight I get, it's easier to know that that is the right thing to do. So at some level I did pursue that, and I have, especially, I've been profoundly understanding of the importance of doing that activity in the long term. So I've been emphasizing again, and I have taken concrete steps towards it. But my thing is, I should have done it much more rigorously and harder. Much more. Or not much, but because the thing is, I did other useful activities for sure. But like spending 3 to 4 hours every day doing that during 18 months would have given me 365 times 3.5, 350 times 3 is, what's that, 35, 6, 70, 105, 1,050, and then add, so let's say 1,300 hours. That's a tenth of mastery. Well, some people say that it's not 10,000 hours, it's actually 50,000 hours to real mastery, but so sorry, not 365, it's a third upon that, because it's very 18 months. So it would really have been, instead of 13, like would add 7, okay, say 2,000 hours. It's like it's a fifth of fifth of 10,000 hours. That's quite much. But again, 3.5 hours every day. Some days would have been excluded for sure. Like some days it's impossible to fit it in, but For 90% of those days, yes, it would have been possible. And so the thing is here, but it's also, should you include contemplation of the academic models, which I haven't done for sure, but not with intention really, like with strong intention, this is the right thing to do. But yeah. Okay, so but the thing is here that, which is sort of confusing here, because I often say that if I had known, I should have done it. But that's sort of, like, how could you know? It's like a child that, should a child go to school? It's like, yeah, it's provided that the answer is yes, you could say, like, but should the child understand why it should go to school in order to go to school? Well, the answer is probably no. You can't provide that insight to a child. But in being an adult, should you do, like, then it's not as obvious. Well, you could say, should it go to school? Well, it's better to not go to school because you learn better outside school. Some could say, and that's a totally valid objection and consideration. But the thing here is, I want to really to boil down on this, because one thinking, by the way, is that if I do like 3 to 4 hours of this every day and then have reflections and so forth, I can reward myself for watching half movie every day if I want to, because that's just 2 to 3 hours or so. So yeah. But sometimes I wonder where the heck did all my knowledge go to, or all my time? Sorry, where did all the time how did it disappear? Not those 1.5 years, but even before that, it was like, well, 1.5 years ago I was, I had to think, 1.5, yeah, and an addition 1 year onto that, a little more even. It's been 3 years that I've been doing, like, living like I'm doing right now. And those 3 years, because already like 2 months into that period, I had read the whole book about, like, Charles Munger book, Poor Charles Almanac, that propagates for academic models and doing all that stuff. And I knew already then, because that was sort of a enormously powerful motivating force for me to, and I'm not saying that I needed this time and I should have been, because as I said, that's why I said that probably last 18 months, not 3 years, because it was much of the time that I probably needed to contemplate things really, really deeply. And one could argue I could have, like, 3 hours every day is still quite a small amount. Maybe it's true, I should have done it last 3 years. Then I would have been at 40% of 10,000 hours right now, 4,000 hours, and almost. And that's because it could have been the right thing to do, actually. Now I have other things that I'm contemplating of doing, like for example right now, which is writing articles on Medium, and there's a lot of things that I try to contemplate. Is this the rational thing to do? And this, what should I do? Should I discipline myself more? And should I da 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 da? And so another thing too, because in order to do something, and because this is again what I said, that in a circumstance when you don't know what's right to do, doing what is right without knowing that it is right is not actually right. I would actually claim that. Or but that would mean that people behaving in a way that have a negative impact on society should sort of do that. No, they shouldn't. They should, instead of acting, they should think and try to optimize understanding, because that's the only middle way. That's the golden middle way. That's what I would call it for now. The golden middle way. Oh, I sorry for being so enthusiastic and happy, but it's actually quite profound if you think about it. Like, for example, thinking about what's good, left-wing politics or right-wing politics. Well, the answer is the middle. Okay, not the middle way in the sense that it's like you should be a centrist necessarily, but the middle way there here is to rationally consider what is the right answer, which won't take 5 minutes, won't take 1 hour, won't take a day, a week, a month, a year. It will probably take decades. So what should you vote for? Well, that's not for me to answer. I don't know the answer to that question, but understanding is probably the right thing to optimize for. It's profoundly insightful, but it's still, so yeah, connecting to this thing, and that's why I say you have a rational responsibility to be, moral responsibility to be rational. Because I don't think you have a rational responsibility to be moral. I don't think you can justify morality with rationality. Maybe you can. Anyway, in order to be moral, you have to be rational. So, but in the case where you, like say, you're incredibly dumb, and you don't know what the consequences of your actions are, and you're behaving in a way that you think is moral, you have good intention, you in that situation, you have sorry, my brain again, get tired, but probably should move a bit. Try. Been sitting here quite long, more than an hour, I guess. But yeah. So lots of train of thoughts here that it goes back and forth, but just okay. Where were I? Rationality. Yes. So what should I have done last 18 months? And then would have been the right thing to do if I didn't know what to do. And in some sense, no, I shouldn't. I shouldn't have just acted based on those type of rules, because then I wouldn't have known what was the rational act, right? Or because, I mean, the only way to behave, do the right behavior is to understand that it is the right behavior rationally, right? So that's something really useful to think about. So yeah, I should behave, but if you know what's rational, so if let's put it this way, the insight I didn't have then to guide me was that it would have been rational to do that 3 to 4 times every day. And the reason I didn't understand that was partly, especially because, well, I don't remember how long it took, but and it's gradual process, and this is probably the reason why I didn't. This is sort of the key issue here. Like I back then had some quite philosophical question that I didn't get how to get. I didn't have an answer to because I never studied philosophy. I only did it for myself and quite a lot, and I read something on Wikipedia and so forth. But I have a deep craving for understanding in order to justify like all that I learned during the high school and so forth. And so it was for time for me sort of learning the empirical, like even a deeper understanding of David Hume and those enlightened me thinkers that just sort of on a philosophical level justified science and understanding and so on and so forth. And I still think that it is a good approximation, and that it's better to bet on it. Like I said, you could say philosophically try to undermine lots of science and try to write something new, but it's probably not a good bet, because it's, or put it this way, it's when you're not doing that, it's best to refer to science. And until the point then you know that something else is better, then you should adopt that. But if you're not sure, you should rely on science in order to guide your life, because it seems to be the most reliable thing. Although now I'm starting to be sort of skeptical, because yeah. If you start to contemplate philosophical questions, like knife, for example, it's the same stumbling block that I had 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And because there are alternatives, especially in philosophy, but I sense that there's so many things in science that make sense and give people incentives to contemplate philosophical alternative worldviews, that are incentives pushing them towards that rather than profound insight of something alternative that is better. It's more like incentives pushing people to contemplate that, just because it would be so amazing to reveal something that nobody understood earlier. And yeah, so and I've actually, and don't remember if I mentioned it last time, but I wrote it down yesterday or today, that I suspect that Charlie Munger, he says of that what he did right in life was that he avoided doing the mistakes that everyone else did, really. He the best thing he did was to avoid mistakes. And I suspect, I don't know, because he never talks really. He gives some hints. He said that he never liked to be stuck in conversation with people who contemplate the meaning of meaning. And that's the only thing. And I think somewhere he quoted a philosopher, and in that quote, I'm not sure it was in the quote itself, maybe it was a sidebar, that's not necessarily what Chalamonga thinks, but just basic information in the book about what some people that Chalamonga quoted or something like that, but that in that quote, or so it's not necessarily what Chalamonga thinks, but that philosopher said that what you should do in the end of your life is contemplating philosophy. That's the right thing to do when you're in old age. But Chalamonga himself never mentions philosophy. As far as I know, never says if it's good or bad. But I suspect that he thinks that that's a big mistake people do in their lives. That they devote too much time to philosophy. But I'm not sure he's right on that. I'm not sure he claims that. Could be, but it could be one thing that he thinks is sort of a mistake in life. But I don't know. Maybe he don't know what's right. I mean, what's rational. I don't know. But anyway, despite these philosophical questions, it is that's why math is so tempting, because it's sort of rational. It's the only thing that is sort of rational. But anyway, so if we have, but on the other hand, like the philosophical grounding, as I said, that David Hume laid out, or many other aligned philosophers that push the emphasis on, which have been with us to some extent through civilization before, like the Greeks and the Romans, in their, at least in their engineering approach, which is not exactly the same as science, but it's similar. It's still sort of some level of empiricism in it, in technology, and it's reality based, or it's based on experience. And that's what the key was in, like, that sort of empiricism. I'm not saying that empiricism is the only philosophical truth, but that's enormously important for science, for sure. And basic, so again, that's the usual. It's an approximation to the truth, you could say, like very useful and good way to think about the reality. And it gives you lots of ideas and insight and so on and so forth. And I'm freezing. So, question now is still freezing. So when I had made that justification, so that could be the argument for, did I really have some fundamental justification for going further down into just doing these academic models and learn them. And I had different approaches to this. I did spend time on it, for sure, from time to time, as I said, but I probably would have gone harder on it now in retrospect. But why? What do I know now that I didn't know then? That's a really good question, because one thing I heavily optimized for back then, except for like, there was quite much leisure, and I thought a lot, and I wrote a lot, and I meditated, but not that much. I mean, just 20 to 30 minutes a day, but exercise and so forth. But what I really did was I read quite a lot from now and then, although not that extreme much, but okay, what I did the most was to listen to videos, because I had the view that listening to actually what inspired me most back then was Tai Lopez, and so he and lots of other people's programs I listened to and tried to absorb information. And now in hindsight, yes, a lot of that was really useful, and I know some consequences of that are that I don't know how good or bad they were. It's so hard to know really, but I think I could have. Okay, this is a topic that is so difficult to address, and I don't know if I had the time to it. And it's some things of this are quite personal, and I don't want to get too deep into it. So it's really hard to evaluate what was the right thing back then. But I do think it's safe to say that at least 1 hour a day I could definitely have done. But again, why didn't I have that insight? I didn't have that insight because I think I was quite confident that I would in some way have done that after 3 years. I think that's what I thought. And I did have moments when I pursued it quite vigorously, but not enormously, but yeah, still quite systematically. And so the question here is, I should 1 hour a day, which should have been the right thing if I had known. But one thing that I've realized about learning and so forth is that but it's this difficult question of learning really. Like everything has its place, and it's not just philosophical, but it's also your worldview and how you perceive intellectual questions, understanding. There's so many parts that contributes in your learning. But one realization that I've got is that although the sort of opposite of this, you are shaped a lot of what you read and sort of that type of thing, but the amount that you remember, especially if it's not incredibly interesting, is very low after a long time, or after like there's 99.9% of what you read you forget, probably. Even though it shapes your character for sure, it shapes the way you speak, it shapes subconsciously, and the concept can pop up during the most sort of non-expected ways. But what's on top of your mind is a really small amount, really, and you could say that it's a lot that goes into the sort of this is an interesting topic. Everything you consume shapes your deep structures of your brain, I would argue, like in incremental amount and in ways that we do not entirely understand. And I probably need to know more in neuroscience and learning and so forth, because that would be really interesting. But the rational parts, that is before our minds, like we can imagine, that is extremely important also. Those things are, and that's probably an argument for a more conservative approach, because we don't know how much in society and culture that is sort of unconscious, and that influences the rational mind. So I think I have to write that down. Sorry for the pause here, but it's a quite profound insight. There's a lot of insight that I've written about here, talking about here, that is really interesting. Oh shit. Time is... But sorry for this interruption. So what should I write? What did I say? Subconscious, conservative in... yeah, the subconscious don't know how much regulates human being. But the rational part, that one we can influence. A lot of other things I want to write down here, but I've forgotten. It's a really good video, this, but so yeah. But where was my train of thought here? Because the rational part of the brain is where we can use images and so forth. So everything, that was my insight that I said, that I got, and that is that you have really to repeat things in order to remember and keep them top of mind. Like one of the cognitive biases that I had learned all the cognitive biases really well, or I knew a lot about them. I'm not good at applying them in my daily life, but I can repeat a lot of knowledge about them and use it, lose it tendency, as Charlotte Munger calls the 19th bias, is really that you have to use it and repeat and so forth. And that's something I've learned, that it's not enough to just consume information. You have to repeat it and ingrain it in your head much better than just repeat. Yeah, you can't only just read. You have to pick out the ideas, as Charlotte Munger said, and ingraining in your head. And yeah, so yeah, so I've been thinking about that a lot. Like that's why I've been just starting to repeating or writing down in a document everything I learn. Now it's sort of just write down ideas, but earlier I wrote down everything I read, sort of summarizing, and also actually recapture, or sorry, what's it called? Retrospecting it. Now I don't do that as much anymore, because it takes so much time to retrospect everything you learn every day. So you have to be quite picky if you're going to retrospect it. But if you're just going to read it, it's quite easy. You can write it, and then you repeat it 3 days after, 1 week after, 1 month after, 3 months after, and 6 months after, and then probably one time every year. So it builds up. So that's the negative part of that. But so it keeps. But yeah. So yeah, that's an insight that I didn't have then, that made me realize that, I'm not sure I've shown my glasses before. Yes, I have. But anyway, where were I? Rational part. Being rational in these type of questions are very important. Okay, sorry, my mouth is just babbling right now. I'm not thinking. Okay, so the question was, when I was younger, or when, like, for 18 months to 3 years ago, what should I have done? Should I have done differently? And why didn't? I should have done at least 1 hour a day. At least 1 hour a day I could have managed, despite like all the circumstances and everything. And why I didn't do it was because I underestimated what I would do in 3 years. No, I overestimated. Not necessarily my insights, but, well, part of it. Some things have gone well, but some things not. And some experiences that is I'm glad to have, but not everything sort of worked out. Not everything. But I could have pursued academic models more vigorously, even though I did so during some periods. I could have done like 1 hour a day. I could have managed. That's not that much, really. I mean, and doing it in a very systematic way. And one other insight I didn't have then was that just consuming information that I did then, which I said this probably influences your subconscious very much, and it's like the people you consume information of. If you're watching them, you're adopting even more, but if you're also reading them, and the ideas shapes you in sort of a small ongoing process that over time has a huge impact, but you won't remember all the bits as well as if you intentionally make this something as to remember and ingrain it in your brain rationally, because all the other things will pop up now and then, and you will, as Charlotte Munger said, you can't just rely on the right ideas popping up when you need them, because you have it to go checklist style, and that's an incredibly important concept that I've understood. And so just consuming information as I did then shaped my character quite much, probably, and my ideas. But then another side of the ideas is that you have also to make the ideas. You can't just rely on that feedback coming up again. You have to intentionally ingrain those concepts in your brain and repeat them, and with intention apply them. Like, okay, now I should apply these models to these problems. Like, and he says you have 100 models, really, the most central in every academic discipline. And that's a lot to disregard also. So he's really taking the most useful one. He knows about, for sure, marginal utility of like going in one academic field only. You must take the most central and then move on to another one. I know, of course, when you're done 100 models, maybe you can add another one and go further down in topics. But yeah, so the main part here, why I did what I didn't understand back then, was that consuming information only in that sense was very insightful and right thing to do. Listen to the right people and so forth. But the piece I didn't have was the rigorous. I should have, as in school actually, studied more, like repeating for myself. But not just that. That's not the most important. The most important is doing the academic models and repeat them and apply them in your daily life, and pursuing that systematically and ingraining it in your brain. And I overestimated that it will just happen in some sense. And it took 3 years for me to realize that I did it in too slow pace. And things just don't happen automatically. I have to pursue them actively. And that could be a learning lesson for the future, because there are lots of things I'm relying on, sort of, it shapes my character. And it is true, though. But it is also true that the shaping could be shorter if you come to rational conclusion and pursuing them rigorously. So being rational is still sort of the right approach. And those type of things, like sort of socially reaching out to people and pursuing things, which is, and I'm not saying this necessarily because I'm extremely bad at it, because rather I think it's the case that most people not honest enough about themselves to say that they're not doing it enough, because no one of us are evolutionary adapted to this society and civilization that we live in. Everyone have a sort of a even though it's much less than some people, be honest about that, but they have, like for example, public speaking is the most common, and that's because we are so deeply evolutionary adapted to not be excluded from the group, because if you are, you will die in previous in evolutionary circumstances and even in history. So you should be very careful to challenge the authorities, because you could die and you could like be excluded from the group and so forth. That's not true today. It's actually a necessity to do what socially could be regarded as not the safest thing, that sort of thing. And it just made me think, like in Sweden we're quite risk averse. Maybe we have a society more focused on excluding people earlier in society, because we have a consensus culture, sort of like everyone's forming after one another, and for good or bad, and that could like on a genetic level, it could be that we have had a history of more death penalty because due to, but yeah. Well, if we have a small population, which we do have, the rate of killing could probably be greater, or the ratio of killing people to the population could probably be higher, just because of it's easier to, if you just kill one, like it's signaling enough, and if you're doing that in a small population, it pushes a higher evolutionary pressure maybe. But anyway, that's just a consideration. Yeah, so the rational thing to pursue, and this insight I could get right now, I think probably should write that down too, that more rational would be more social reach out, etc. So it's just only, so I think that's the case. If something feels like it's not the right thing, and if it's boring or if it's challenging, I think it's even better to expose that and rational consider it, than thinking that it is, to ignore it is, because one way of thinking about it is, well, that probably because it's not good in the long run, but sometimes that could be the case, but that's definitely not always the case. Sometimes the bad thing is the good thing to do. But on that social thing, it's harder for me to address. But for now, I think more time, at least more recently, last year, I think it could have been better to have been even more socially outgoing. Not necessarily with friends and so forth. Like, it's not about being more sociable and less isolated, that I have sort of indeed optimized for, because that really been good for me in some ways. That made me come to this insight that I've had right now. But to reach out to actively search for really incompetent people that you can establish a relationship with, that's, I think, is really interesting. And I did something of that quite excessively for a while. And part of the reason I did that was because I followed and listened to people that was, and now I was just following and observing and forming by higher degree of observation and so forth. So that was probably a good thing. I can't know for sure, but yeah, it led to some quite much reach out and so forth. That was really good. And so, but I think it an issue for me I have to go down through is even more get to the depth of social interactions and reaching out. How like in the same way that I rational or justified some things here, I want to rationally justify social interaction, social reach out to really competent, not incompetent, competent people, so that I feel as grounded as I do right now, that academic models would have been the right thing to do. And so again then, what was the missing key in not realizing that that Monger models, like academic models, were nowadays, was because I didn't know didn't understand that wouldn't come automatically, which again is probably the same thing with social interactions and so forth. It might come step by step, but you can't really know for sure. And it was the same thing with academic models. And the other thing was that I have to write that down, wrong estimation of that I would have finished academic models and ingrained and so forth as with social pursuits. Not that careful with my words here, but and the other thing was I didn't know about repetition and ingraining in brain enough. Because that, I think, is the other key point. I'm harping on this, but that's because I want to ingrain it in my brain. And the thing I want to ingrain was that I had to ingrain it more extremely, like pursuing it and like really getting deep into my brain that this is academic models for this, and this is how, and etc. Yeah. But what about now? 3 hours, 4 hours? I don't know. But I think that's probably something about the right thing to do. And now I know it's the right thing to do. Could say motivation and I've been down that road before, but why did that come up again? I did contemplate it, but I'm not totally sure it was the boredom that hindered me here. It was actually, I just remembered, I thought about, well, this will be boring. Oh, I thought, yeah, I thought that, well, what happens? Yeah, that emotion came, and then I thought, is it good to do when it's not motivating? And the answer is, if I think that way, I will end up as I will risk not really executing on it. It won't happen. So that's the first realization. The other realization is, well, even though it might be demotivating, it's as everything in life that is demotivating, that something is worth doing even if it's demotivating. That doesn't mean that everything that is demotivating and make you feel unhappy is good things to do. Sometimes you have to have a level of, but you have to strike a balance, I guess, there between sort of that type of things. And yes, I have been pursuing that and other things like sort of structuring my day, but so, and I could go into a discussion of what else could I do. There are lots of things I could do that optimize, like for example writing articles and so stuff, and try to get up. But yeah, I have a lot of considerations on that. But yeah, I think in the end, discipline is something that is good. And maybe reason I have been suspicious about this is because, well, to be honest, you can push yourself too hard. I think that's quite obvious, and you could discipline. Sometimes being disciplined about things are, although I am extremely helpful or so what's it called, grateful for the amount of discipline that I've done in my life, but some consequences can happen, and I've sort of counterbalanced that very good. And in the counterbalance, that reminds me of another counterbalance in our society today that I won't talk about because it's quite sensitive, but we have it's not necessarily left-right. It's about, anyway, it's sort of a thing here. We go from this and then we counterbalance, and we counterbalance too much instead of cutting to the middle. But without the counterbalance, we would never come to the middle. But the question is, what's the right counterbalance that we get to the middle, so that you don't, like, get here. So you have to, you want to get there. Assume this balance is the right thing to be at. As I said, you must have a balance to how balanced you are. But anyway, I should have done that. I should have, and so I diminished discipline in a way that is probably good, but now I realized it's hard to know if it was necessary then. Probably, as I said, 1 hour a day is not too much of a discipline back then. I mean, that's not much. That's not that much. And 1 hour, I mean, that's nothing. And so, what's the right amount? Doesn't matter, because as long as I am disciplined in doing it some every day, so the boredom that struck me when I thought about it was that, and so the conclusion is, yes, discipline is enormously valuable as long as you have a rational justification for why. When boredom kicks in, go back to the rational consideration. When boredom kicks in, go back to the rational consideration. When boredom kicks in, understand if it's necessary boredom that is worth it, or if it is something really important, then the boredom is not that bad. And when you push through, it's not just boredom, it's because I can deal with boredom, but if it's like it feels really bad doing, which it kind of feels like, if it's a waste of time, I'm not bored by that. That's another thing. But anyway, doing what is boring or challenging can be very, very useful, and you have to get your rationality straight about it. You have to focus on what is really rational to do and not avoiding it, because I think it's so damn common, and it's not necessarily this tough, like, oh, you're avoiding your, well, that's a part of it, but and a part, yes, so one part of it is sort of Spartan, just face the challenges, the really hard thing, that's the pain. I can take physical pain really good, but there's sort of emotional things, or I can deal with that too, but that's because I have had quite strong conviction about things. Like, for example, pursuing in school and pushing yourself extremely hard in athletic, in workouts and so forth. But when you're not sure anymore that the pushing is the right thing, then you have to go back to what's rational. And when you have the rational foundation, then just push the fuck out on that. Okay, so this really was much about that, but I think it's important to ingrain considerations of what is actually a rational good thing to do. It's So it's been a really long video, 2 hours. But yeah, I think it serves me very well. Now I just want to think, I guess. Exactly 2 hours. That's so damn fucking perfect. And I'll see you next time. Bye.